Today we are going to discuss the Chaos Dwarves and 10 tips that you can use to make them absolutely incredible. They have a couple different niche techniques that other races do not have in Total War Warhammer 3. Tip number 1 is balance your economy. You want more outposts at first and less factories in the beginning of your campaign. You will use the outposts to harvest the raw materials needed to expand your cities and be able to build the things that you need to keep your economy afloat. The factories rely on the outposts to fuel them so you can make your armaments, and the armaments are more used later on to expand your army roster to have more elite troops on the field, and also to build the troop buildings you need. But those armaments you won't need right away. You can also use the armaments for trading, and we'll talk about that later. Tip number 2 is do not overexpand your dwarf empire right away. You want to make sure you have a big stack of resources. I would recommend 1,000 raw materials per turn, and then about 300 to 400 armaments per turn before you absolutely explode and expand in all directions. The Chaos Dwarves early on can definitely spread themselves too thin, which will allow your enemies to destroy you and take over. Tip number 3 is artillery and cannons are amazing. They are not the longest range artillery in the game, but they are absolutely incredibly powerful. What they lack in having barrages of multi-unit cannons or mortars like other races, your Chaos Dwarves will have single unit Hell Cannon, regular cannon, and so on. But with their strong front lines and awesome blunderbuss units, the enemy will have an extreme hard time getting to your cannons, and these cannons will whittle down your opponent tremendously. I recommend using normal cannons or the Chaos Dwarf rockets when you switch it to the single rocket to attack your enemy lords, heroes, and single entity large monsters, or even groups of trolls and larger monsters. And then use your Hell Cannon mortars against the infantry, and when you have it towards the end, the Dreadquake mortar is the absolute best in the game, and as of right now, will probably get nerfed in future updates. Tip number 4 is the tech tree is awesome for the dwarves, and I'm going to give you some hints on what to focus on. Now, with every tech tree in the game, there's pros and cons, but I would definitely start with your labor quotas to keep your laborers coming in, and then move into the left wing here to ultimately try to get extended shifts. This will help you secure the raw materials needed. I like going that route, in between saving up for these big chunks that you have to spend to get into this side of the tree. Definitely you want to sprinkle in some of this stuff from your sorcery tech tree. Tallest towers will get you the control boost, campaign line of sight increases, and then early on the envoys to the conclave. This will help you become friends with other Chaos Dwarves, or at least not enemies. Within the military tech tree, early on, the Stronghold Syndrome helps out big time because you will have a lot of laborers and hobgoblins early on. Some notable ones would be this mandatory service early on helps out big time because it will help you get better raiding, better settlement raising and sacking, which you will be doing a lot. And then you want to focus on getting your Chaos Dwarves situated with their tech. Some of the best ones in this whole tree, definitely up the middle here with reduced rationing, -5% upkeep for all armies is awesome. I recommend saving your Conclave influence for the Tower of Tsar, which we will talk about soon. You always want to be raiding with the Chaos Dwarves, especially future enemies. So you want to get into their zone, activate your raiding stance, and harvest them for extra resources, money, stuff that you're going to use. You should never keep your Dwarf Lords idle. The Chaos Dwarves are a very industrious race. Every city in the game, every region, every terrain seems to be a suitable climate for them because they move in, they terraform, they turn everything into an industrial wasteland. So if you see that you have a future enemy nearby that you know you're not going to become allies with, definitely raid them and don't worry about the penalties to diplomacy. Tip number 6 is you want balanced armies with the Chaos Dwarves. Your front line does not have to be as strong as you think. I would say 4, maybe 5 frontline units. Definitely you want to mix in your Chaos Dwarf units. I would say 2 to 3 shield bearers, maybe 1 to 2 of the great weapons, and then you could sprinkle in some meat shields with your laborers. Don't sleep on the hobgoblin units. They are pretty good, especially early on. They have decent armor, they have shields, and then these sneaky gets guys are ranged also. They have stalk and vanguard deployment. You definitely want to take advantage of your missile units. You want 4 to 6 missile units, especially if they're blunderbusses. Fire glaives are also awesome, but you'll get them later on. And even the hobgoblin archers are not that bad. The whole idea is though, these blunderbusses, put them in front of your lines, have them shoot incoming enemies, and then they can fall back behind your melee front line. They can also hold their own in melee combat. They're not that bad in melee combat. The remaining 10 to 12 spaces in your army, you want something fast moving to attack other enemies that outrange you, like the elves or pretty much any other race has better range infantry for missiles. To do that, you would use the wolf riders to get in there quick, but they're pretty weak and they don't last long. That's where the slow moving bull centaurs come in. These guys are great to mix in into your front lines and also use them as a slow moving cavalry to take out the enemy's flanks or back lines. They are awesome, and especially with the right leader and lord, they get a lot of bonuses. Also, the monsters for the Chaos Dwarves are great also. I love one of the 3 choices you have for the flying monsters to mix in with your armies: Great Taurus, Lamassu, or the Bale Taurus. Amazing options. And a lot of people don't like the Kadai Fireborn. They say they're glass cannons, but again, mixed in with your front line, they are pretty powerful. And then you can go down the alley of artillery and war machines. You have the Skullcracker, which is your melee-focused chariot, basically. Very powerful, especially to enemies that don't have armor and big groups of enemies. These things absolutely destroy the zombie and vampire factions, like Vampire Coast, Vampire Counts. And then you have the Iron Daemon. A lot of people don't like these. I do kind of like them. They still have melee, but they also have the option to shoot these little cannons that do pretty decent if they hit. Your endgame artillery, obviously, we talked about earlier. Hell cannons, great for troops. These Deathstreaker rockets have 2 shooting options, one for big groups of enemies and then one big singular rocket that acts like a cannon almost, great for lords, heroes, monsters. Your Dreadquake mortar is absolutely devastating, very expensive to field, especially if you put it on a fast-moving war machine. Sometimes it might be better to just get the Dreadquake mortar, but these things will not be able to move quickly without having it on a train. On top of all that, while your army and artillery is holding the lines and devastating, you want to get into the magic of the Chaos Dwarves. Lore of Hashut right now is some of the most powerful in the game. Some notable ones, obviously, Flames of Asgore, amazing, super powerful attack. The Curse of Hashut is definitely good against enemies that are stationary. And lords, it devastates them. Dark Subjugation negates leadership and melee defense. Use this against enemies that are attacking your front line. Hellhammer is one of my favorites. It's definitely a sweeping wave spell that could devastate enemies while you're holding them off. Big groups of enemies. Ash Storm lowers speed and gives fire weakness. You want to use this on cavalry or other enemies that are moving and quick. The High Elves hate this spell. And then Burning Wrath is almost like a fireball spell, and it causes some extra damage after it hits in a little whirling effect. Great school of magic. The Chaos Dwarves also get access to Lore of Metal, Lore of Death, and Lore of Fire. Overall, they have an amazing spell base. The next tip is to utilize your trade routes. You want to sell off your extra resources for whatever you are in need of. If you have extra gold, you want to use that gold to buy laborers or even raw materials. If you have enough laborers, then you might want to sell off your armaments. If you have extra armaments, you could send armaments to around the world for big lump sums of raw gold. This gold you could use to strengthen your military, strengthen your armies, your positions. Definitely something that you want to be doing. And then finally, you can use a random resource, usually armaments or gold, to buy raw materials. This can be useful if, again, you have the excess resources. Don't ever let your trade routes sleep. They are basically an AI-controlled secondary lord that levels up and gets an army from random encounters, and their armies can be widely mixed and matched with every race in the game. Your convoys can have dragons in them, mammoths, ogres. Anything you could think of, they'll pick up along the way. Another thing is you want to utilize your extra laborers for quick gains. This is tip number 8. If you have extra laborers and you can't foresee the amount needed going up, you have the option to sacrifice them for quick conclave influence. I never do this because it's only 10 influence, not that much. But the two that I always use, sacrificing the laborers for money, a lot of money. And you can go down the line and just sell, and just boost your gold rapid fire. If you have problems with control, you could set an example and sacrifice the laborers for control, which definitely gives you mega boosts in control. Don't ever forget that you could do that with the laborer screen. Tip number 9 is the Tower of Zar is basically an arms race that you're competing with the other Chaos Dwarf AI factions. You start off at the lowest level of the tower and work your way up, and in the beginning it's very cheap. Starts off very low, about 75 influence up to 125, 150 to take over the lower regions. Some of the ones I love, Thaumaturge starts giving you Winds of Power, reserves, and capacity, greatness. But everything in here is useful, and at the end game of the Chaos Dwarves, you're going to own every single one of them. So really pick your flavor and playstyle. I love the armaments 25 per turn and output 10% more. That's a great early one to get, to start getting that going. Campaign movement range for all characters, incredible. And then there's a couple in each one that just grants random stuff. For example, in the Industry District, this grants you every 3 turns, a random follower or banner ancillary. And then you have one over here in the Sorcery District, every 3 turns a random magic item or talisman. And then in the military, random, every 3 turns a weapon or armor. Could be useful. I think there's better. For example, the Machinator is plus 100 per turn raw materials. Very useful. Some great ones mid-tier and tier 2. These are abilities you use in combat. It just helps out to be able to summon Firebore, and that helps out major. But again, this is playstyle related. You will pick what you want based on your playstyle. This Wrath of Zar really helps out to take out enemy front lines or archers that are just standing around. This is great. And then as you build up in each district, you get bonuses on the way up. For example, starting in tier 3, you notice in the Sorcery District, if you pick the Mutator, you get Winds of Magic Power Reserve Capacity plus 3 for each sorcery seat claimed. So every seat you own underneath it in the sorcery district will add to that bonus. And each one gets something like this. Upkeep minus 1% for each military seat owned below and above. Very useful for endgame. And then finally, your Demon Forge, Hellforge. I call it all three things simultaneously because I'm nutty. You'll use your extra armaments to boost your troop capacity for your elite units. I consider everything that's not a hobgoblin or laborer an elite unit for the Chaos Dwarves. They have some of the most powerful units, in my opinion, in the game. Now, this screen that you see now is the Radius mod that I'm using. That's why you see a couple other things here, like dual weapon dwarves. And real quick, the Radius mod catches a lot of flack from OG veterans of Total War Warhammer. They claim that the Radius mod just adds hundreds of units, and that's just not the case. Especially with the Chaos Dwarves. And after you beat the Chaos Dwarves on vanilla, I recommend using the Radius mod because as of right now it only adds very few numbers to the Chaos Dwarves, but really radical numbers, as you can see, up to 34 of them that you could field in your entire army. But the main point of this is the manufactory will add bonuses and buffs to your armies based on how much you invest in each category here. So for example, now we just unlocked a new manufactory. Spell resistance plus 25% and enables suppressive fire for every single blunderbuss unit. To activate this, you would go over to your missile infantry and then you would pick this out. Now what this does is it adds a major upkeep. Right now I have enables magical attacks for all my blunderbuss units. We'll now give them suppressive fire, and to do this you're going to spend 528 purchase and upkeep cost is factored into that. So it's 16 per unit times 33 because I have a lot of blunderbuss units. Now this won't for vanilla. You're not going to have these numbers early on. These will be end game numbers, you know. And this save I have is very end game. But you can see it dropped my, my increase of armaments from, I think it was 800, 900 down to that now, because we are beefing up these units majorly. Again, every category has special upgrades. I only have 7 flying units, so this won't cost much. But you can enable Vanguard deployment, Stalk, Frenzy is a great one. Let's do Frenzy and Vanguard. It's going to cost us. But that just dropped it another 100. The War Machine ones are crazy. Let me show you some of these. Forge Fire. Negative 12 armor of anyone in the area of your cannons. This works great when they're right behind enemy lines. You have enemies pressed up against your front line, and these guys are close by right behind it. Extra powder, but this one, barrier. Can't go wrong there. Blazing body. And then we apply it, and this is going to drop us down a lot of upkeep per turn. Again, be careful using this, but mid-game to end-game, when you have a lot of extra armaments coming in per turn, you want to be utilizing this to turn even your most basic Chaos Dwarf unit into an amazing war machine. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. How are you liking the Chaos Dwarf faction? I asked a question on Reddit, what is their weakness? Besides the obvious of range, and other races outrange them with arrows and cannons, their main weakness that people have said was the DLC price, showing that they really don't have many weaknesses. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Are they going to get a nerf? Are they incredible? I think so. Thank you for watching, and I want to thank my supporters of the channel. If you want to support the channel, we have a Patreon, we have channel memberships, or you can hit me with a super thanks down below. But the best way you can help for free is just liking the video, commenting anything down below, really helps boost the video up the algorithm, and subscribe for more awesome content. Thank you very much for watching.